All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. Today's video is part of the ongoing effort to expand the public archive, which you can check out at brozime.com. I'm developing the public archive to be an all-in-one, easy-to-use guide for new and returning Warframe players. If you'd like to get early access to the project notes in progress, or to provide feedback or new ideas for the public archive, you can become a member on Patreon, or additionally, subscribe on Twitch. Thanks so much to all of my current subs and patrons for supporting the project. Now let's jump into the video. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. So, as we first get in here into September, the update could happen at any time. It's likely that it's going to happen on a Wednesday, a Thursday, or a Friday. So, pick any one of those that you might randomly guess it be this month, and it's probably going to be one of them. Ideally, it will be happening early this month, as I'm going to be gone at the end of the month, and I really would not want to miss this update. But, provided it does come out early, I wanted to talk about this stuff early. We are talking about Archon Hunt Theorycrafting. And this is basically what we might encounter in Archon Hunts and what I think you're going to want to have ready, or what you should try for your first runs on the content to kind of get more of a feel for it and figure out what it wants from us, because I don't think we're going to know that initially going into it. For that, I am very aware that there are going to be probably some significant changes with weapons, not only just weapons themselves, but also ammo mutation is changing, and the ammo economy is also changing along with ammo mutation changes. And we don't know how those changes are going to affect the wide variety of weapons that are in Warframe. So I'm going to do my best to adjust for like worst case scenarios in a lot of ways. So keep that in mind in terms of what my weapon suggestions are going to be here. But we're going to talk about all the things that I think are possibly going to come up in these more punishing, as they're supposed to be, Archon missions. First and foremost, we have possible modifiers and obstacles to beat. This is going to be like the main bulk of this and what I think that we could encounter in the Archon hunts to stop us from just obliterating the content. And the number one thing that I think can stop anybody is energy drain. Energy drain, even light energy drain, is going to hurt frames that already have high drains just from their abilities, such as Mesa, for example. Also, we know that you're not going to be able to spam energy pads in this content like you can't do in the Steel Path. You're going to get one per every 3 minutes, which is not very much. So if you don't have long-term sustain, it's going to be hard for you in all likelihood. Also, if there is an energy drain that is fairly constant, Trinity can get around that. It's been a long time since we've been in kind of like a Trinity meta, but if she is necessary to get through energy drain on these missions, or on like one of the Archon's missions, for example, then she will immediately return. If the amount of energy that she needs to kick out is necessary, that she can kick out rather, is necessary, she will immediately return and be not only a tank frame, but also a frame that is providing the entire team with energy. And that is worth noting that if you do not have a Trinity, if there's a lot of energy drain, it's possible she immediately makes a comeback. Also, alongside that, primed flow will also become way, way more important for this content. It is worth noting that Harrow is also generally going to be a good option, and he can provide a lot of energy. He is a much greedier support, and you do need to get the headshots in order to provide those like big boosts of energy. And it only really works whenever there's a lot of enemies around you. So if you're in a one-on-one boss fight, or well, a team-on-one boss fight against one big enemy, Harrow is not going to provide any energy, and that is definitely a big consideration. Although, just as likely, that one big singular enemy would likely be immune to Trinities too. So they might both have that issue, and it might be to taste whether you could pick Harrow or Trinity for this content if there are energy issues. Also worth noting that in extreme cases, Inaros, but better than Inaros, Hildren would be there. Hildren has a good armor strip, which is only going to get better in the new update, because we know that armor stripping is getting kind of normalized across the board. With Pillage, Hildren can do a lot. It will not only give her energy back because she uses shields as energy, but also Hildren is usually not affected by energy drains, and it's unlikely that we would have like a really negative shield modifier in these missions, at least in my evaluation. Hildren might be a really good choice for this if there's a lot of energy drain and you just want to kind of skip all the mechanics and providing yourself with energy and just be like, me, Tunga Wunga, shields, die. So that is definitely some options there if we come up against energy drain. Attenuation. So for those that don't know what attenuation is, this basically is adaptive damage reduction for tough enemies, or enemies that are supposed to be tough. Liches have this. Sisters of Parvos have this. I have 2 poverty builds that I showed off if you'd like to do the Sisters of Parvos or the Liches, which can be problematic for newer players. And those are going up against attenuation and need a few more specific things because of that. But I wanted to talk about ways to get around attenuation that you can utilize if you're more open in terms of what you can go and get, which I'd assume you would be if you were looking to take these challenges on. Banshee Sonar. Number 1, first and foremost, if the Archon has attenuation, and it's really extreme attenuation, Banshee Sonar essentially gets around attenuation, because no matter how much damage reduction you add, if Banshee is going to... Banshee will just take your damage to damage cap. You will keep casting Sonar until your multiplier beats the damage reduction, because the damage reduction on attenuation never goes to 100%, which means even if you only have 0.01% damage, 0.01 times 12,000 will still kill whatever you are shooting at. So Banshee Sonar, like is often used for the Sisters of Parvos, will definitely get you there, provided that the Archons are vulnerable to it. It basically bypasses damage reduction just by raw force. Just too much multiplier, not possible to have enough reduction. Because the reduction on damage doesn't go to enough digits is kind of the actual problem there. But it's probably a good thing that it doesn't. Also, the Sea-Doo passive helps get around it, because the Sea-Doo passive is Condition Overload. That passive has so far basically gone under the radar in terms of attenuation. Attenuation pretty much doesn't take it into account. So if you can put statuses on the enemy, you're going to be able to use the Sea-Doo's passive and get considerably more damage than you would otherwise. It's also notable that with the headshot multiplier improvement that we're going to be getting in the new update, the Sea-Doo may be even better than that, because if you can use all that damage and then get a headshot, it's going to be a full 50% damage higher than anything you could have possibly gotten before, which should also be extremely, extremely helpful for taking things out quickly. And the Sea-Doo is relatively accessible. I know it's max rank with Deimos, but Deimos is a really easy syndicate to max out at this point, and it's also extremely worthwhile to do so. Now, the other extremely high DPS thing that you can use is the Nell Prime. Nell Prime is going to be getting a huge boost with the headshot multiplier improving, because the Nell just wants to get headshots. If you can proc the headshot on Nell Prime, its damage is outrageous. It does millions on millions of damage per second whenever it's ramped up because you got a headshot, and that will pretty much chew through anything. There's not much that can survive the Nell Prime, and that's going to be exacerbated by it doing 50% more damage now with the new update. Nell Prime is also just generally good and is going to be very helpful if you're someone that is going to be needing to move out of AoE weapons. Nell Prime having infinite ammo and just firing infinite bullets down a hallway, going to be really helpful in terms of moving on from AoE weapons to just moving on to hallway sweepers, as they were. This is contingent on the enemy having a head that you can shoot, though. So if for whatever reason you say we go up against Naira, who's the snake-looking one, if shooting her in the head is either too difficult or not possible, and the Nell can't activate, then it's going to be useless. It does, it is pretty much entirely predicated on being able to shoot them in the head, but provided you can do that, the Nell is incredible and should be super solid. Also, attenuation that does not have a status limitation alongside it, you can use the Phantasma and the Catabolist in order to essentially get around the attenuation in a similar way to the way that Banshee does it. So, attenuation without status limitation is not a thing that has happened before in Warframe, and what I mean by that is if you look at Liches and Sisters, you can only do so many procs of any given variety to them, and it's all like 1 or 2 digits worth of procs, and very low at that. I think it's 10 cold procs that you can do is the maximum, I believe, and that is terrible. Weapons that deal damage with status are awful against Liches and Sisters and pretty much every enemy with attenuation, because they also come with those status limitations. If the Archons do not have those status limitations, the Phantasma and the Catabolist both do the exact same thing. You build them for a heat focus, high status build, and the Phantasma applies 10,000 heat procs to the enemy, and the moment that the enemy takes damage from that, they will die. That's true on the Catabolist and the Phantasma. Enemies die from that. There's only so many heat procs that can be stacked up before it will get through any amount of damage reduction. So if there is not a status limitation in place, those two weapons are going to be absolutely phenomenal for taking those enemies down. Also worth noting is that Octavia's one can be used to deal high damage passively. This is provided that the Archon or enemies in the room will shoot Octavia's one and don't have like some kind of like anti-distraction thing where they won't shoot it and they can't fill it up. So there are some considerations with that, but Octavia's one is just generally very good if the attenuation is just going to be there and you're just going to have to kick through it. Also, taking the focus off of you or your teammates and having it just hit Octavia's one and having that damage scale up and deal damage back to the Archon is just a good damage improvement. So that is also possibly going to be very good, and we're going to keep coming back to Octavia possibly being very good. Also, any armor strip is going to be helpful. So attenuation and armor strip stack with each other. The DR stacks on top of each other. So if they have enough armor to have, like, say, even something very low, like 50% damage reduction, it's going to take all of their attenuation, like let's just say it's 99%, and then also their armor, which is 50%, and you are going to get 99.5% damage reduction out of them. What that means is, if you strip their armor, you do double damage or better. So you're probably going to want to have some kind of armor strip in order to deal with them. The good news about this is, as we mentioned before, armor stripping is going to be kind of universalized. Styanax is going to be new, and he's going to have a very good armor strip. Hildren's armor strip should be really powerful. Pillage, that's also available through the helmet system. Embers 3, also in the helmet system, has a baseline 50% armor reduction from just one cast. So 2 quick casts of that should strip all the armor off of any enemy. So that should be really useful. Ember also very easy to get on the helmet system if you're looking for a simple one to grab. There are also going to be a number of other ones. People that are continuing to use Ash's one, which I think is going to really fall off, but his one with the augment was a popular choice whenever things were less consistent. And there are a number of other Warframes. Necros's Terrify, for example, is getting buffed, though I am pretty certain that the Archons are likely to be immune to that, though maybe not to the armor stripping part. So those are all some considerations to make, that you're probably going to want to armor strip, because it's unlikely that any of the Archons are lacking in armor. But that's damage attenuation, a few ways to get around it. Just extremely high damage is helpful. Other things to consider, like minorly here, is that provided we're allowed Necromechs do a whole lot of damage. I do not think we're going to be allowed Necromechs in the battles with the Archons, though. Puzzles. So, puzzles, a sequence that you need to learn and figure out in order to actually defeat the Archons. We saw this, obviously this is, more of a raid thing where you have more of a puzzle rather than a specific, just like one-on-one fight encounter. But in terms of puzzles, there's a few things here that are notable. Number one is that Octavia, with her 2 and her 1 and her 3, she can make your entire team invisible. Her 2 can distract enemies, and her 1 can just kill enemies. That's all really good for just making it so you don't have to deal with enemies and can instead focus on whatever the puzzle is to figure it out. Whether you just need to corral enemies into a specific area, her 2 can help with that. Or any, like, even if it's as simple as you needing to figure out what order to press buttons in, if you can simply throw her 2 and her 1 and have enemies not be a bother, you can sit there and be like, okay, what is this match 2 I need to do, or some such other thing in order to get the door open, or something like that. So Octavia, going to be really good in a situation like that. Also, Titania and Warframes that have teleports, Nova and Nezha, have in the past been very good at simply not caring about any kind of limitation, mainly doors. So if you are one of them, you may just be able to, walk through the wall, as it were. Especially on release, there are usually some level holes here and there that haven't been gotten rid of yet. That's very likely to get fixed if it's available, but I did want to point it out as a possibility where you could simply use like hyperspeed Titania to clip through walls that are not in their perfected state, let's say. Also worth noting, tank frames. Obviously, frames that are so tanky they can just simply ignore all of the enemies, like Revenant with his buff on this next update, are potentially going to be just, you know, able to ignore everyone. Adding light crowd control, like Neja's 4, the spears, would also be very helpful depending on how annoying the enemies are going to be and how on top of you they are. So that is also a consideration. But just being able to survive whatever is going to be pretty helpful. That also applies to large enemy waves. So if you need to just kill a large amount of enemies very quickly, this is pretty simple. Your frames that are good at killing are probably going to be good at killing still. I know that might be a surprise. Octavia, Saren, Mesa, Baruch, a notable one, also has very high DR that is universal, and Elude may possibly be useful. Hasn't been useful before, but it is a possibility. Hildren, of course, with her like full armor strip, like just burn build. And then we have Protea for the large amount of AoE, and also her 2 is sometimes very effective, and her survivability is good. Zaku with the scaling damage of their 2 is very, very powerful. And then Zephyr, in most cases, can do extremely high DPS. The enemies do have to be able to be grouped into her 4 in order for that to usually really kick off. But Zephyr is also a very safe Warframe that has that nice crowd control, which would also apply to our puzzles section here. This is pretty self-explanatory. If there's a large amount of enemies that you need to kill quickly, pick a Warframe that does that. Things are pretty simple there. You can check like most of the builds that I've put out in terms of the builds refresh, and you're going to be getting that on most of the frames. I mean the good ones, right? And then we have constant damage, AoE, and drain. So this is the one that might be most problematic for most Warframes. This would be one that would definitely hit Banshee in particular. Health drains, just strict health drains, like such as Vampire Mode on Nightmare. These can be completely just overlooked with the use of Magus Repair. If you're using Repair on your Operator, you can simply use that to heal occasionally, and you should be fine. You may need to like swap to a Vitality to make it kind of a longer timer before you need to do that healing, but that can be mitigated on all Warframes if there's just a slight like health drain that's happening that can kill you. If there's a health drain that's happening that can't kill you, like Vampire Mode in the Nightmare missions, you can simply ignore it. Like that would really be my main advice, and if your shields break and you get shot, you'll just die. Obviously, for some Warframes, that's not like a thing that you want to do, and using Repair is still going to be smart for a lot of cases. But that is also a way you can go about it, just using your shields purely just to tank and not care. Constant damage fields, if they are high, you can use extreme durability Warframes, Neja, Rhino, Baruch, once again, Gauss, who is immune to a lot of damage types. Gauss is not fully immune to all damage types, so for example, if it is like a constant toxin damage, Gauss will not be helpful at all. Inaros and Nidus, notable things about Inaros and Nidus is that they are health only, at least until they have an Archon shard in them. And that means that they are going to be really vulnerable to getting one-shotted, because health only basically means you do not have a shield gate. You can get hit once and just die, and that is a significant downside for both of those Warframes. Also, I don't think that Inaros and Nidus individually have much to bring to any of these missions in all likelihood, though I could be wrong about that. Nyx is extremely safe with her 4. She is a bit slow, but she also comes with that full defense strip from her 2, and the ability to bring, you know, whatever is necessary from the Helmet system if that's going to be helpful. Also, she can keep her 3, which is just Mass Hysteria, which could be useful for sections like the puzzles. And then we also have, of course, Protea, just throwing tons of the shield drones. That has the benefit of affecting your entire team, and Wisp, with the constant health regeneration that you and your squad are getting. On high strength Wisp, which it usually is, that should be enough to keep everybody going in the squad. Also, specific arcanes. Arcane Grace, whenever you take damage, you percent heal for a while on just health. Obviously very useful if you are a health tanking Warframe or if you have like a high health pool. Arcane Aegis, definitely much more useful. Arcane Aegis basically says like, don't die whenever it activates. Even a super low level one, like completely unranked, is going to be extremely useful for keeping yourself alive in the circumstances where it's going to proc, because the proc chance is the same all the way through. On certain frames like Hildren, though, you are going to want a higher rank one, as it's just going to be more and more helpful. Elemental Resistance Arcanes. So, in the case, like I said, where it's constant toxin procs being applied to you, or electric procs being applied to you, or heat procs being applied to you, the arcanes that say, no, those procs don't work, have some possibility of being useful. I think it's an extremely low chance, and I don't think the DE would generally design an AoE to be killing you or trying to kill you in that way. but it is possible, so I wanted to point it out. Teams using Trinity, Wisp, Gara, or Nezha will probably just be immune to all this. Obviously, for Nezha, they need to be using the augment for Nezha's 3. And for Gara, it's also going to be quite a bit more work because you need to pay attention to your teammates and refresh their 2s that are on them individually, because their defenses don't refresh when yours do with your 4. Your wall does have to go over them, or you will have to recast it on them. Trinity and Wisp, though, should be plenty of tankiness to go around. And Wisp, of course, has the benefit of the additional speed, which can be very good. Because there's also the slight possibility that this will be a speed run of the mission that is necessary. If there's a time limit, any speed increases are also going to be helpful. But I think a speed run, like time limit thing here, is fairly unlikely, as DE usually doesn't lean in that direction, or at least not severely. Giving us something like a half an hour time limit or something like that is probably not going to be a big deal. Operator mechanics. Okay, notable. Transference static is kind of new. Most of the time you can just ignore it and it's not a big deal at all. But basically, if you die enough times as the operator, your Warframe dies. So if you need to do mechanics as the operator and you're constantly dying, that can come back and bite you in the ass because you're not able to self-revive in these missions. So going down is actually way more of a threat than it normally is. Obviously, your teammates are going to be able to res you, but that means that there are 2 people not doing anything when that's occurring, and that could be very problematic. So, for the 2 things that you can do in order to really mitigate this, Magus Glitch is the main one. This turns off transference static, which means that you will receive no negatives from dying as your operator, just like literally none at all. It just removes the mechanic entirely, so that is a potential thing that you can do. And then also, kind of on the halfway point side is Emergent Savior. What Emergent Savior does is when your operator would die, you instead become invincible for 5 seconds and then heal to 60% of your health. That can only happen every, I think, minute or so. I believe it's a minute. It's every 90 seconds, every minute and a half. But that's usually going to be enough, especially if you have a decently built operator. And it's usually going to be more convenient because you're not going to be sent back to your Warframe. You're just going to be invincible whenever you would die, and you can continue doing whatever it is that you are doing. Also, Matterize Void Strike. This is a really big important thing here. Void Strike right now, you cast it and then it's gonna, it takes a minute to get back into your Warframe because there's like a longer animation and stuff. For those that did not see it, on Prime Time, we found out that the duration between switching between your Warframe and operator is pretty much being completely removed. Like you're gonna blink and just be in your other form pretty much instantaneously based on what they showed on Prime Time. That means that Void Strike is way, way, way better, and it's leaving 1,000% damage on the table. If they have stuff like attenuation, switching to your operator, activating Void Strike, and then getting that 1,000% additional damage to work through that attenuation quickly is probably going to be super helpful, and it's also, of course, very helpful if your operator needs to do a bunch of damage, as it is the single best way to do that. In addition to that, if you are looking to get your arcanes on whatever amp you've chosen, Eternal, Eradicate, and Onslaught are pretty much the current staples. They're both new, and they're both available in the Zaramon, which is actually a good thing because it means they're actually kind of much easier to get, and the Zaramon farm is a really good one. So this, whenever your energy is depleted, which is actually not goes to 0, it's just whenever you get kind of in like the low 10-15% range, this will turn on. 8 seconds of 180% critical chance is hyper consistency in terms of you doing your higher damage, which is very powerful. And then Eternal Eradicate is whenever you cast any operator ability, you get plus 60% damage. Now, this is additive, not multiplicative with Strike, but you can use this while Strike is on cooldown. Strike obviously has quite a bit of a cooldown, and just getting general 60% additional damage is usually going to be absolutely fantastic because there are not a lot of multipliers that you can get on an amp, so being able to get at least 60% is usually more than enough in most situations. Moving on. Operator stuff should be pretty simple. I don't think you're going to need any of this stuff in order to do the content, but it definitely might be really helpful. Objective defending. So this is pretty simple. I really don't think that this is going to come up. Like, I think it's unlikely that they have us defending a thing from the Archon, and if there is going to be a defense, it's probably going to be short and separate from any special mechanics, if I had to guess. However, it is worth noting, Gara can put her 2 on pretty much anything that exists in the game, whether it's friend or foe, and when it's a friend, it gets a 90% damage reduction Although if it is an object and not a character, I think it's 50% damage reduction instead. But 50% damage reduction is still doubling the EHP of whatever you put it on, making it considerably easier to actually defend, making it take considerably more hits. Double, actually. Neja also, potentially, if whatever you have to defend is able to have your 3 put on it, that is also 90% damage reduction, although with a health cap on it that you're going to be able to throw on, which is also going to be useful for your teammates. Octavia, once again, for that distraction and damage, and then really for objective defending, if you have one person doing any kind of defending, whether that's like even just Gara's 4 plus her 2, defending whatever the object is, the DPS frames or even just a DPS frame alone should be able to take down whatever the threats are in the area, whether that be disruption targets or what have you, which can be gotten through kind of the same exact way with the attenuation stuff. Whatever it is that they throw at you, DPS should be able to get through it, and some minor defending is usually enough. With all of that said, what are the frames and weapons that I recommend? These are just like my initial feelings. This is just my opinion. This is not like hard facts, but what do I think is going to be the best to be taking into this really for your first clear? And for like, you know, your toe in the water, what is this? What am I going to need to do? I just want to start this up and I want to clear this. What am I bringing? Octavia, Neja, Trinity, Mesa, Asterix, Nyx, and Gara. I think that these 6 frames all represent just some good things to have with you in a squad, and I think they will all, sans Mesa, maybe move into a group really, really easily and can pair up well with kind of whatever else anybody brings. None of these frames really step on each other's toes, which is a big thing. So if you have, like, you know, you load into a mission and it's 4 Mesas, you're probably still going to be fine, provided that Mesa's 4 works. And also, a thing that we found out from Pablo's Twitter recently is that Mesa's 1 is getting fixed. Now, we don't know that it's, like, definitely getting fixed, but it appears to be from Pablo's tweet that Mesa's 1 is going to be fixed to do considerable damage and be like an actual really big burst of damage that you would want. So there is some potential that you can use her to get through damage attenuation or just like, you know, deal burst in stages. And you can use that alongside her 4, which could be a potential huge amount of damage. And Mesa is very survivable against non-melee enemies. If there's a lot of melee enemies, that becomes considerably worse for Mesa. But if there's a lot of guns still, Mesa's damage reduction is quite high, and you should be fine in terms of survivability. And she normally has pillage subsumed onto her, which is going to be getting a buff and will be a very, very good armor strip to have in your back pocket. And it's also a defensive move to give yourself a bunch of shields. So there's a few asterisks on Mesa, but I do think there's a lot of potential for her to be very, very good. Neja, just super survivable. Tons of, like, just damage, especially if you're Roar Neja, provided that whatever you're hitting is weak to Neja's 2 for the damage bonus there, plus Roar. That's going to obliterate most things. Your 2 is also a damage buff for your entire party, even if they're not near you at the time that you use it. So that also has a lot of potential. Nyx, like I said before, it's just invincibility, safety, and using your 2 in order to remove all defenses from the enemy. Seems super solid. Gara. The reason Gara is here is she's very similar to Neja in that her 2 will not only give you 90% damage reduction, but will also be a damage bonus whenever you put it on enemies. So provided, like basically everything else in the game, the Archons are weak to Gara's 2. That could be very useful. Gara also has the benefit of being able to defend objectives with her 4, and she can use her 4 as a big AoE AoE damage attack for knocking down waves, at least of weaker enemies that can have some trouble with scaling. Also, speaking of scaling, if you do her 2-4-1 combo the right way, which just go watch the Gara video for that, you can get infinite damage scaling on her 2, which, if this is a like very long protracted mission, you could have enough time to constantly build that up, and provided there's enough energy happening, you could build that up to such a high number as to encounter the Archon and just outright kill them with your AoE that is stuck to your body. That is probably not going to happen, or probably won't be worth doing, but it is a thing to take into consideration. Also, Octavia is the most busted frame that no one plays, so here she is. If you have Octavia, or you like playing her, you probably should take her. She makes you and your entire party invisible, gives a giant damage bonus, and has her 1 with infinite damage scaling provided enemies will shoot at it, and her 2, which is like just turning off enemy AI. So she just does infinite busted shit. So you probably should be a little interested in Octavia, especially if you think you might be having trouble with his upcoming content. All of these builds for these different frames are available if you just go to this page on the website. By the way, if you go to brozime.com or click the link in the description, which will take you right to this page on the website, you can just go in here and click Octavia, Neja, Trinity, or Mesa, or Nyx, or whatever, and it'll take you directly to their builds page. I have a huge, like, all my builds are fully organized there, so if you want to go see any of my Warframe builds, the entire builds refresh and all of those videos are all up to date and there. So go check those out if you're looking for a build to take into there. In terms of weapons, I'm still working on getting more weapon videos up to date, but weapons that I would suggest, especially going into this update where we don't know too much, Nell Prime. Like we said before, against attenuation, it's just really good. Latum is a weapon that does both. If you have it fully evolved, its 1500% damage bonus is just extreme. I believe it's 1200. It's a huge damage bonus on its last evolution. It's extremely powerful, and it's powerful in both forms. Its first form is going to be benefiting greatly from that increased headshot multiplier and will still do tons and tons and tons of damage. But also, you're going to get the AoE form, which is useful to kill just giant groups of enemies. It's not that hard to use in terms of like getting it charged up to keep using its AoE form whenever you need to. And it's also very good at single targets. So the Latum can definitely do both. So if you've been keeping up with the Zaramon content, which is where you get that, I think it's going to be a super solid option. In terms of melee weapons, generally I would suggest a Glaive. Glaive Prime is the best Glaive in the game. It constantly procs Slash, which is very good, and it's alongside just generally very high damage. If you don't have a Glaive Prime, the Zorus is, of course, very good, especially for newer players. But that's just a really solid AoE weapon to be utilizing. Very powerful. Bubonico. We don't usually talk about the Bubonico too much because it's totally a terrible weapon. Don't tell anybody. But the Bubonico is a weapon that also can do both. It is single target and also AoE. It does a good AoE status spread, and then it focuses on in with shotgun pellets. It also has regenerating ammo. So no matter how bad like the new ammo economy stuff is, it has infinite ammo. So you won't likely have to worry about that. Alongside that, we have the Tenet Archiplasmor. Tenet Archiplasmor just generally is a really good weapon. It does extremely high damage. It can affect groups. It's really good in hallways, and it's just generally super powerful. So if you don't have one of those, I would suggest getting one. And I believe we got confirmation that this is actually not losing its headshot multiplier, at least not yet. So there's also the Fenmore. The Fenmore is the primary version of the Latum, and if the Latum is going to be good, the Fenmore is also likely to be good. The other bonus to the Fenmore is it is a heat status building weapon. So similarly to the if they don't have status limitations like the Phantasma and the Catabolist, the Fenmore kind of splits the difference between just being a Phantasma or being a Catabolist in terms of those just going all in status only. That's all we have. The Fenmore can do both. It does have good raw damage because of its evolutionary paths, because you can get that plus 2,000% damage on that last evolution, which is what I would suggest going for. But it also has enough status to be a status weapon. So if you go look at my Fenmore builds video or the Latum builds video, you can go check that stuff out. The Fenmore is extremely good and I think has a good chance of being solid here, especially if they do not have those status limitations. It's also got infinite ammo while it's evolved. So that's also another consideration, is that it's unlikely to have ammo problems. And the Latum is also in that grouping. The Nell Prime, also infinite ammo whenever you get headshots. And the Tenet Archiplasmor shoots very slowly with big high damage shots. And it should not be getting any ammo economy changes in all likelihood. So I think for all of these weapons, they won't have ammo problems. And they're going to be really solid for going into these missions. Regardless, that is going to do it. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. Hopefully the update is soon. Let me know what you guys think. Am I over-preparing just like I did for the new war? Or is this like maybe what you were thinking, what you think we're going into? Or is there anything that I missed in terms of modifiers or obstacles? Let me know. And remember, go to brozime.com. Thank you very much to all of the patrons for supporting me there, and also all the subs over on Twitch. If you'd like to get early access to all of like the notes and stuff that I am putting on screen and like what we usually see in the videos, if you are a sub or a patron, you can get access to a special area of the Discord and come see all that stuff early. Regardless, that is going to do it, and I will see you tomorrow. Also, hey everyone, we have a new outro. So sorry this has taken a little while to get going for those of you that are over on the Patreon, but thank you so much to all of the $10+ patrons. Brutus, Salazar, Dylan Dworsky, Ephrain, Jeremy Stevens, Joshua Adams, Malik X. Williams, Mitchta, Trent Hallmark, Victor, and Zach Zahner. Thank you very much for being $10 patrons. And also, thank you very much to just all the patrons in general. It's been really awesome to try and get this big website stuff off the ground. And I hope you guys continue to support me and are enjoying the content that is going up there, including this video. So yeah, it's been a fantastic time so far, and hopefully we can just keep it going. Have a good one, everybody. Hopefully you guys enjoy the new outro as well. I think it came out pretty nice. And that should do it. Later, all.